Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. And joining me like he always does for the THI Football Preview Podcast, THI publisher Andrew Jones. AJ, as always, got a really exciting show coming up. Of course, we got Deana coming on for her Deana's Dandies segment. We'll also be talking to legendary Virginia writer Jerry Ratcliffe of JerryRatcliffe.com. Hootie, yeah. I love
Hootie.
that nickname, man. It's a great nickname.
The real Hootie. He's the
Exactly,
real Hootie.
The real Hootie. We got him coming on after that. So, and then at the end, we'll wrap it up talking a little bit about some memories from our AJ's time, I should say, covering some of the Carolina UVA games over the years. AJ, before we get to that, though, Carolina got a big game this weekend against the Cavaliers, 8 p.m. kickoff in Charlottesville. The South's oldest rivalry is officially back. Carolina coming off a big win over NC State. Now they travel up to play another rival in Virginia, night game. Not going to be an easy game for Carolina, even though you look at Virginia's record and maybe think this might be a walk in the park for Carolina. I don't think it's going to play out like that, though.
Well, the Wahoos are better than the 1-4 record.
I would agree.
Two of the losses, they lost quarterback Brennan Armstrong. They didn't have him for the second half against NC State.
Mm-hmm.
Second half didn't go well for the UVA, and they didn't have Armstrong for Wake Forest, which was a very winnable game for the Wahoos, and they didn't win that. So when they've had him, for example, at Clemson, they were tough and hung around. Or this past weekend at Miami, they were tough and hung around in a driving rainstorm. It's not just what he does in the field. He's not a great quarterback, but he's definitely a guy that has leadership skills, and you want your starting quarterback out there. All teams are going to be lifted a little bit more when they have the starter out there. So I don't want to put an asterisk, not going to make excuses, but they are playing a team, I think, that with a healthy Brennan Armstrong, and he will be healthy this weekend, or at least going into the game, that UVA should be a pretty good club. They are pretty solid defensively in the front seven. They have a little bit of skill. They're a physical team. They're going to play hard. They're going to play tough. They're going to have a good game plan. Carolina has a lot more skill than UVA does. Carolina should win this game. But I think, to me, as I cover a team through the course of a season, chronicle the season, as we see everything sort of unveil as the process goes on, I can't help but think back to 2 weeks ago, Jacob. Tar Heels were coming off a big win over Virginia Tech, a club that they had to beat, and they rocked 56 points on the board, and everyone's patting them on the back, number 5 in the country. They go down and play a one-win team, and what we talked about would be a tough atmosphere, and we said that FSU is going to play to a standard because that program's got a standard. Those kids are going to play for all that stuff in the front of the jersey and everything that you see in that stadium, and they did. So now, 2 weeks later, very similar scenario for Carolina. Coming off a win over a hated rival. They rocked a bunch of points on the board. Everyone's thinking, okay, no, the worries are gone. The offensive line pass block. The defensive line stopped the run. But they're going to play a program that doesn't like them.
No.
And it's a night game. All the scenarios are very similar to 2 weeks ago. So for me, it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it. Mac addressed it earlier in the week. Saying, look, we didn't handle the nighttime start and all these other things that are very similar 2 weeks ago. So for them to grow and show that they've learned from some things, they're going to have to go in there, have a little different disposition when this thing starts, and just play better and win the game. If they play well, they'll win the game. If they don't play well and they screw up on special teams and everything else, and they're not fully focused and ready, they could lose this game, no doubt.
Yeah. So it sounds like you think this could be, and I definitely agree with you on that point. This has the makings of to be I don't want to use a cliche right now, but I will, a trap game for North Carolina coming off a big win over a rival. And then you also look ahead to Carolina's schedule. They got a couple rival games to get some in-state opponents coming up. So it's almost like a 4-game stretch of rivalry games for this Tar Heel team.
I just think that, this is – okay, everyone's going to say, God, there goes AJ again. They've only played 18 games under Mac Brown Part 2.
Still early.
They're still figuring stuff out. They're going to do it for a while. We're going to talk about this every once in a while next year, too. Mm-hmm. They're still trying to figure this stuff out. So a trap game, I don't know if it's a trap game. I think that Virginia needs to have their attention. They need to look at this club and say that's a big, physical, strong team that's going to fight. They're going to scrap. They're going to have a good plan. And they've got more than enough guys in that roster that can beat North Carolina's roster. There's no doubt about that. And they have a healthier quarterback. If I'm a Carolina player, I'm thinking, okay, they played Clemson tough down the road. They played Miami tough last week, and that's all I care about. I don't care about the rest of those games because they've shown that when they play top 15 teams, and both those games were on the road, that they are ready. They do play okay. And so Carolina being the number 15 team in the country, and the fact that everybody in Charlottesville hates UNC for the most part, and that is significant. As you and I both know, growing up in that state, there's a lot of dislike, for lack of a better word, for UNC. I don't know what the fan situation is going to be, but it won't matter. The kids have learned how to play under the circumstances that they're in right now, so I don't think fan stuff matters that much anymore. They're going to be ready to play, and they've got enough players who can beat them. So to me, this is going to be, how does UNC handle all this stuff? And if they handle everything during the week the way they need to, and they go to Charlottesville with the right disposition, they will play well. I think it's all based on these 5-6 days leading up to the game. I think they'll play well when they get there if everything upstairs is working in fashion, or the right fashion.
And Charlottesville's been a tough place for Carolina as a program to win too, hasn't it, AJ? I mean, it's not been a very friendly place for this program for a long time, really.
Well, it's not, and Mac didn't have much success up there when he was at Carolina the first time around. There were some bizarre losses. I'll never forget punt return problems in the early 90s in a game. And then the first game I ever covered, we'll deal with later on here in the show. The first game I ever covered is one of the biggest losses in UNC history. Dre Bly was a part of that game as well. So it hasn't been a great place for UNC. They've kind of flipped that a little bit in the last 10 years or so. They've been able to win a few times up there. I think this team can and should win. I think they need to exploit a suspect secondary at UVA's. Protect Sam and let him go through his progression, and I think the Tar Heels will move the ball. They might have a lot of success on the ground too because they're run blocking at a very high level right now, and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter are excellent college players, and perhaps both are NFL players as well. So, but it's the pass game. If they're going to bust this thing open, if they're going to demoralize UVA, they got to hit on some big plays. Sam didn't have a great percentage game last year against UVA, but he hit on several big plays, big touchdowns that kind of kept Carolina in that game. Again, maybe they lost a decent percentage of the snaps, but they had big plays that were able to sort of keep them in there. They're going to have an opportunity to do that again this weekend. And I think Sam is due for one of those games where he hits a 50-yarder, a 60-yarder, a 45-yarder for scores, and not to Javonte Williams streaking. I'm talking 35, 40 yards in the air. Deana catches it in the breadbasket and runs it in. He's due for something like that, and the matchup suggests that this is a game in which that could happen.
For sure. AJ, you touched on the offense there. Let's switch the focus over to the defense for a second. You talked about this game having some similarities to Florida State, or it could have some similarities to Florida State. But you look at the weekend before Florida State, Carolina obviously beating Virginia Tech, but it was a game in which the defense did not play very well. So the defense travels down to Florida State kind of low on confidence. Kind of flip that around. Defense played pretty well against State. I mean, really only allowed 14 points. The last touchdown was just kind of, had some reserves in the game. Does that give the defense, or should that give the defense a little more belief, a little more confidence in what they can do and that they are moving in the right direction as they head up to Charlottesville this weekend?
Anything we do in life, if we're kind of inconsistent and good one week, bad the next, or two, or whatever it is we do in life, if we suddenly have a great day with it, feel better about it.
Oh, absolutely.
You're a little more excited to get into it and do it the next time. Whatever it is. I don't care if it's riding a bike, painting, cooking, whatever, learning a new car, trying to figure out how to work your Sirius XM in a new car. Once you get it done, you're like, yeah, okay, I've got that figured out.
Good, yeah.
So, yeah, they're going to go into this one feel a little bit better. I think that these kids have pride. They're competitive athletes, and they want to know if they've got it figured out, and they want to prove they've got it figured out, and they want to win. So every guy that steps on the field, they know that this is my role. This is my job on this call. And if I do my job and the other 10 do their job, we have a really good chance of winning. So when you don't question whether or not you can do that less and less, that means you have a lot more confidence. It means you're going to make plays. You're going to be quicker because you're not going to be thinking and slow to react like athletes that lack confidence generally are. Mm-hmm. We may have seen a little bit of that in Tallahassee. I don't know. Maybe they just got whipped. But, yeah, when you hold your opponent to 34 yards rushing on 19 attempts, after what happened the previous two games, you got to be feeling pretty good. And UVA is not a great running team.
No.
They're okay. UVA's offense has moved the ball some. They're like in high 40s in total offense, something like that, but they're not scoring. They're having trouble when they get close to the goal line. They're 75th in scoring. And so once they get inside the 30, inside the 25, they've had some issues.
Not finishing, yeah.
And you know, Brennan Armstrong not being there for a game and a half too, I think that probably affects some of those offensive numbers and some of those point totals as well. But I think the defense should be pretty confident going in, and also wanting to continue to improve. That's one of the things this staff harps on these guys. You got to get better every week. We saw that with last year's team. But they were much better at the end of the year because they worked to get better. You disregard the result after it happens. You move forward. You get better. You work on what needs fixing. And there's still, I mean, every team's supposed to be that way. Some teams are a little bit more in refinement. This team's not yet in the refinement stage, especially on defense. They're still in the growing and building stage. That's why it was so encouraging for UNC that Miles Murphy played well in 24 snaps, that Clyde Pinder got a dozen or so snaps as well and made a couple of plays, because they need to be able to trust down the road more guys in the interior defensive line. So if in the next 3 games before they get to Notre Dame, if Pinder can get 45 snaps and Murphy can get 70 snaps or whatever, they're going to be that much better and that much more reliable by the time they play games that when they're playing comparable or better teams, which will happen after Thanksgiving. So, yes, is the answer to your question. That's a 600-word answer to your question.
No, it was a good answer too, AJ. Last question before we move on to the next segment. Just a really quick one. It's going to be a cold night up in Charlottesville. Does that play in the hands of Carolina or Virginia anymore, or is it just, it is what it is kind of thing?
It affects the sports writers because it's an open-air press box. It's going to be down to 37. I told my wife this morning, I said, you've got to find my jacket for me. I don't know where it is. I got to have a pullover for the first half and a jacket. And people have never seen me in a jacket before.
I've only seen
me in one. Yeah, it's an open-air press box, and, we're there for several hours a few hours after the game. So the game will end about 11:30 or so. I won't leave Scott Stadium until probably 3 a.m., and it's going to be absolutely ridiculous.
That's a night game for you,
yeah. What can I say, man?
I'm
not going to complain. People hate when sports writers complain.
Hey,
I'm not complaining.
Hey, open air press, but it's adversity. We all got adversity we deal with.
But the good thing about open air, and they have open air at Georgia Tech too, and technically Syracuse is that way because it's already inside. Mm-hmm. But the great thing about it is you feel like you're more part of what's going on. You're more part of the atmosphere. Now, I don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like, but I get to hear stuff. So that's the good. And they do have little heaters.
That's nice too.
At Scott Stadium. Mm-hmm. I did a Penn State Virginia game there one time where it was like 96 at kickoff. It was a 3:30 game, and I was like, great. I was just dripping sweat all over my laptop.
I think we've had our fair share. I think I've had my fair share of games like that too in my 2 years of THI. Man, the elements can play a factor for the sports writers too. Don't let that.
Especially at Georgia Tech and UVA.
Yeah, you're not lying about that. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, AJ, great job on this segment. Next up,
thanks.
We know we got one of my favorite segments coming up. AJ, I don't know if you want to take it. You didn't take it last week. I don't know if you want to take it. I can do it if you want, but I got to ask.
I've retired from that role.
Nice. Retired officially announced. AJ officially announcing his retirement.
I hung it up.
That's fine with me, AJ. I'm glad I can take the reins on this one. Next up, got one of my favorite segments on this show, Deana's Dandies. So without further ado, here's Deana.
Hey guys, it's the Virginia Cavaliers taking on the North Carolina Tar Heels. So Virginia doesn't have a lot of North Carolina kids on the roster this year. They only have one kid to be considered a dandy, and his name is Sam Brady, who played at North Lincoln High School. He's a freshman linebacker for the Cavaliers, so don't know if he'll get to play or what, but was wanting to mention him, the only Old North State prep star on the Cavaliers roster. So I'm going to do a little reversal. I'm going to talk about the Virginia players that are playing for the University of North Carolina, and there's about 8 of them. Most notably, Daz Newsome, the wide receiver, one of the best in the country. Then you have Jonathan Kemp, who's done an exceptional job kicking off for the Tar Heels this year. Some more guys, Eugene Asante, Cameron Kelly, Chris Collins, Ethan West, Giovanni Biggers, and of course, Tony Grimes, who should be playing high school football this year, but he early enrolled, and he's Mac Brown's first 5-star recruit there in Chapel Hill. They love to recruit the Virginia area. I look for more Virginia kids to be on the Tar Heels roster. They're going to hit 2022 class up there in Virginia. So check back next week for your next edition of the Dandies.
Great stuff from Deana, as always, during her weekly Deana's Dandies segment. Deana, one thing that you talked about, obviously Virginia didn't have a lot of players from the state of North Carolina on their current roster, but I think one of the biggest things that intrigued me is you listed all those players that are on Carolina's roster right now who've been recruited from the state of Virginia. And I think every one of the guys you listed is not only plays for Carolina, but has seen minutes this year. You even think of a true freshman like Tony Grimes, Ethan West. Before Ethan West got injured, he was starting on special teams. So everybody that you listed from the state of Virginia has not only come to Carolina, has been on the roster, but is playing some kind of minutes for the team. It seems like from that, Virginia is turning into a really reliable source of talent for this UNC coaching staff. Not only that they can bring in, but they can trust pretty early to throw in the game and get things done for them.
Well, UNC's always had great luck in Virginia. Look in the past, some of the best ever. And one thing I forgot after I did that, look at the coaches from Virginia. You have Tommy Thiefy and Jay Bateman and Dre Bly with a lot of Virginia. That's their home and everything. So I think with the recruiting, the blueprint, Virginia is going to be in play for a lot of kids for the Tar Heels to really make a mark in Virginia again.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest players in North Carolina football history are from the state of Virginia. We did a podcast about 3 weeks ago before Virginia Tech game, 4 weeks ago, about recruiting, because Virginia Tech and Carolina have gone after a lot of the same kids in Western North Carolina and in Virginia. And you go to the Tidewater area, there's so many great Carolina football players that have come from there, but also throughout the state. I'm from Northern Virginia. There's a lot of talent up there, a ton of schools, a ton of people. And Carolina's got a few of those kids. Biggers is from Woodbridge, Asante's from out by Dulles Airport. So a lot of players up there. Bryn Renner, remember him from years ago. He was from Springfield. There's talent all over the Commonwealth. There's the Tidewater area, Richmond and Northern Virginia right there alone. You could win a lot of football games getting a decent percentage of the best players from those areas. And that's certainly what UVA and Virginia Tech are trying to do. But as we're seeing with recruiting at UNC right now, especially with this class of 2022, 21 was real strong in North Carolina. 22, Virginia's going to be real strong. Deana, you had a piece on Zach Rice this week. He was in Chapel Hill last week, top offensive lineman in the country in the class. George Pettaway, Tyshawn Chapman. These are kids, Jacob, you and I saw up at Virginia Beach when we went and covered a camp up there in June. Mm-hmm. And there is a ton of talent. So Virginia is just an extension of North Carolina to the staff. They're going to hit it hard. They are hitting it hard. And right now there's 8 kids on the roster from the Commonwealth. When we do our preview show for UVA or Virginia Tech in 2 years, I bet you there's 16 or more. It's going to be a lot of kids. Yeah, they're going to get a lot of kids from up there.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of this Virginia-North Carolina connection, 2 THIs from Virginia.
That's a good point.
Jacob from Lynchburg, AJ from Northern Nova.
Yeah, Alexandria. I grew up a couple miles from George Washington's house.
Love that. Parkway. Yeah, I'm from Lynchburg. That was a Deana's Dandies little clip right there.
That's a double dandy.
She was hitting us with a little dandy.
Double dandy.
Anybody who used to listen to baseball on the radio, that's a hang a star on that one.
Yeah, that was
great play in the field.
That was good stuff, Deana. Good stuff.
Jacob likes to do the point to the passer thing too.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of my favorite things to do.
In honor of the World Series, I'm hanging a star by that.
Yeah, hang a star up. Last thing I want to ask you guys about real quick before we move on to the next segment. Virginia Beach. Deana, how important is – I know the state of Virginia has been important to Carolina and continues to be, but how important is that Virginia Beach region right now, especially when you consider the connection that Dre Bly has to that area?
Well, when you look at recruiting in the Southeast, Virginia Beach, Charlotte, Atlanta, they're 3 of the hotbeds. Mm-hmm. So And Dre Bly has direct connection to two of those. Charlotte, that's where he was, and then Virginia Beach, that's where he originally came through high school. He's a legend up there. So very important. You know, they got Tony, who's supposed to be playing high school football this year.
Mm-hmm.
They got Trevon Stevenson, a recruit from Virginia Beach. And like you guys said earlier, you guys was up there for that game day academy. So there is lots of talent.
Tons.
That's why I don't understand why Old Dominion is kind of not better than they are.
Well, they're still
like
growing.
Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they're still growing. And look, if you can go, those kids are so good. They can do better than Old Dominion. No disrespect to Old Dominion, but by the way, in Virginia Beach, Trey Bly is an absolute legend. I mean, he's one of those dudes that every kid growing up there knows who he is, and his presence when he's up in that area is news. And there's a field named after him, not too far from where we were at Game Day Academy, right at Virginia Beach. So, and plus, everybody knows him in Charlotte. He's got a foot in Charlotte. He's got a foot in the Tidewater area. Two best places to recruit talent north of Atlanta and east of the Mississippi in that geographical region. If you were to draw a line or a circle around it, and Dre Bly is smack dab in the middle of it. So yeah. Carolina's going to do well in those areas for a while.
I think you're right, AJ. It's going to be interesting to see how Carolina continues to recruit in Virginia, especially with Mac Brown at the helm. Well, that's going to do it for us in this segment. We got a really special guest coming up, longtime legendary Virginia writer, Jerry Ratcliffe, who also runs his own site, JerryRatcliffe.com, is coming on to chat with us about the Who. So here's our interview with Jerry. Hope you guys enjoy.
All right, right now we'd like to welcome our very special guest. He is a legend in the Commonwealth, Mr. Jerry Ratcliffe from JerryRatcliffe.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Hootie, H-O-O-T-I-E, and he's the original Hootie, _spellout.com, at Hootie_.com. And Jerry, welcome to our preview pod.
It's always great to be with you, AJ. You're one of my favorite guys, man.
Well, I appreciate that, and I guess I'll add another zero to the check after this, okay? All right, Carolina UVA this weekend. We've already hit on what Carolina needs to do, so we're going to learn a lot about UVA here in this segment because nobody knows UVA football and basketball better than you. So from what I've seen, when UVA has Brennan Armstrong, they're a better football team. And I told Carolina people that's the team that you need to kind of think about. Think about the one you saw in Death Valley. Think about the one you saw at Miami, and disregard the club you saw in the second half against NC State and at Wake Forest. Is that your assessment?
You're spot on with that, Andrew. Yeah, they're a completely different football team with Brennan Armstrong at quarterback. He's been in the system for 3 years and behind Bryce Perkins. And then now that it's his turn, he's actually been better than some people thought. I guess the knock on him, and he kind of got rid of that the other day against Miami, but he's been off to some really slow starts. And the team has fallen behind. They were outscored something like 43-0 or something in the first quarter until that Miami game. So he's gotten off to slow starts. He struggled with his accuracy in the first quarter of games. But as the game grows longer, he gets stronger. And he's had some incredible second halves this season. That's one thing that the staff has been working on hard with him, is trying to get him off to faster starts, and by doing that, calling plays that he's more comfortable with, that he's more confident in. And, the guy's a pretty good passer. He can make all the throws. First time starting, I guess guys in that situation tend to struggle a little bit with confidence and maybe I think he reads defenses and coverages okay. I think it's just an accuracy thing, or maybe settling his jitters or something early. But he's a guy that can not only beat you with his arm, he's a good, strong runner. He's a different runner than Bryce Perkins. Perkins could turn on the jets and had a lot of more moves and could make you miss. Armstrong is a guy who just would rather run over you, and he's not the kind of quarterback that will slide if he'd rather just put a shoulder into you and try to gain more yardage. So he's an interesting quarterback. He'll be better. He's got 2 more years of eligibility left after this one, so I think he'll be better as he goes along. But right now, the main thing is for him to get off to good starts.
Well, with that said, what is the strength of this offense, and what is the biggest concern of this offense?
I think the strength of the offense is him, actually, is Armstrong. How he goes is usually how the offense goes, and I guess that's cliche, but it's true. They're kind of struggling in other parts of the game. We thought this was going to be a much better running team, and it is much better, but then there's not much to compare it to in the past few years. They haven't been able to run the ball at all, other than with Perkins, as I mentioned. They do have 2 experienced running backs, and they do have the entire offensive line back from last year. So it has been better in that respect, but it's still not where it needs to be if you want to establish a strong running presence and make your play action passes and your rollouts a little more effective. Without Armstrong, they're in serious trouble, as we saw in some of the previous games, because Lindell Stone, his senior backup, is a guy who can only throw short passes and intermediate. He can't go deep, and he can't run the ball. And then the other 2 quarterbacks that they've used since then, sort of a 3-headed monster. Keaton Thompson, a transfer from Mississippi State, is a dual threat quarterback, but his shoulder's injured, so he can only run it mostly. And then Ira Armstead from South Bend, Indiana, is a true freshman who's been actually fairly impressive. He's a dual threat guy too, and he can run and throw, but he's a freshman. So they really need Armstrong to be in there and to be healthy. Wayne Talipapa, the starting tailback, is experienced. I think he's pretty dangerous down near the goal line. He has a nose for the end zone. He's a really good second effort back, but he's more of a one cut straight ahead kind of guy than out in the open field. He doesn't have a lot of moves. He'll run right at you. His backup, Shane Simpson, is a transfer from Towson, who was a FCS All-American, consensus All-American 2 years ago. He had a knee injury that cost him most of last season. He transferred in during the late summer, and he's added to the running game. They have another kid that transferred from Indiana back in the spring, Ronnie Walker, who had to go through 2 bouts with the NCAA to get eligibility, and he got it 2 weeks ago and then got sick. So we haven't seen him
read about that. Yeah.
So we're not really sure what he brings to the table. So the running game is better, but it's not where it needs to be. The passing game, Armstrong's really good on the short and intermediate routes now. He doesn't have a lot of deep threats, and the one that he does have, who caught everyone by surprise, is Lavelle Davis Jr. from down in South Carolina, a true freshman. Most of us who cover Virginia didn't even know much about him until that Duke game, and he had over 100 yards catching, had 2 touchdowns, and he's 6'7", a lanky guy, 200 pounds, and he can get up in the air, has incredible reach. So a lot of times they can throw the fade or something and just let him go up and get it. But he missed last game. We think with COVID, they don't announce who their COVID players are, but he missed last game. He's expected to miss the North Carolina game. So Virginia is in a little bit of trouble when it comes to trying to go downfield and keep the defensive backs honest. Terrell Jana is a senior who is really the leader of the receiving corps, even last year when they had Joe Reed and Hassis Dubois, but he was really the guy that kept them together. And he's not off to as quick a start as he was last year, although he did kind of come on strong in the second half of the season. he's been making his presence known the last few weeks. Billy Kemp is a guy who kind of caught people by surprise. He didn't have much to do in the offense last year, but right now he may be leading the ACC still in receptions. He's averaging about 9 or 10 catches a game. But he's really not a deep threat. Nor is Jana. The one long pass that Jana took for 49 yards against Miami was mostly catch run. Jana and Kemp will nickel and dime you to death, which will keep your linebackers and safeties guessing where they're going to be. But the only deep threat they had against Miami was another transfer, Rashawn Henry. He's about a 6'4" guy. He caught the touchdown pass. I don't know if you saw it, but he caught the touchdown pass to put Virginia ahead late in the first half, and probably they would have won the game had that touchdown not been taken off the board. But they had 2 tight ends lined up on the line of scrimmage, and it was an ineligible man downfield. But they're working hard on him to try to fill Davis's shoes in the downfield threat category. The offensive line, again, all those guys are back. One of them, Swoboda, the really big guy, he's like 6'9", 320, was hurt last week. We don't know his status. We might find out about tonight on Bronco's show, but he was hurt last week in the second half against Miami and didn't come back in the game. So that's pretty much the offense right there. A lot of it seems is if Virginia's going to move the ball against Carolina, it's going to have to come in smaller chunks.
Jerry, to focus on the defense for a second, switch over to that side of the ball. What are some things that, the UVA's defense has done well this season, and maybe some things on the flip side of that are kind of causes for concern if you're a Cavalier?
Well, it's kind of been disappointing so far in that category, Jacob. They returned 8 starters. They returned 17 guys that have started at least one game in their career. And most of the guys who crushed the school record in sacks last year with 46 are back. So a lot of people were expecting this to be a dominating defense, and they have been very hard to run against. But they've been burned on a lot of explosive plays. I think Miami had 6 or 7 of 25 yards or more. The secondary is beaten up right now. In fact, we don't know the status of 2 of their most experienced guys, Joey Blunt and Brenton Nelson, were injured early against Wake Forest and never came back in the game, and they missed last week's game. And as of yesterday, Bronco had not gotten an update on their status for this week. So I don't know if he's kind of hiding that until game time or what. But
a coach hides something from the media? Nah. I've never heard of that before.
No, never. And then Darius Bratton, who I think is Nelson's backup, was injured against Miami too. So there's 3 defensive backs, that we don't know the status of right now. And it's not the same secondary particularly without Nelson and Blunt. Those 2 guys are hard hitters. They take risks. They're experienced. They're both been around starting for a long time. And so, our expectations going in was this was going to be a dominating defense. They call themselves Havoc. It's one of the defensive coordinators came up with that.
That's a cool name.
And they have, last year they created havoc almost every game, and they put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. They were either hurrying them or forcing bad throws or knocking them down, sacks. There just hasn't been much of that this year until last week against Miami. They had, I think they recorded 5 sacks and started to look like their old selves again. But they're going to be very vulnerable, I think, if those guys in the secondary aren't well. It's not the deepest secondary in the world. They have some really young, talented but young guys, and I think the way Carolina's offense is, I think they will try to exploit that if those guys aren't around. You have a really good passing attack, and Virginia has struggled. They've given up, again, a lot of big plays, mostly passing plays, not very much on the run. I think the defensive front, the front seven is really solid. They're experienced everywhere. And they're only giving up, I think, around 3.3 or 3.4 yards per carry, which is usually among the best in the NCAA on an annual basis. So they've been very hard to run against, but they've been very vulnerable against the throw.
Well, that'll be a good matchup Saturday because Carolina's run game has been off the charts.
Yeah.
Their offensive line is doing a much better job run blocking. And right now I would say that their run game has been more consistently excellent than the passing game. So let me ask you real quickly, 2 or 3 keys. What 2 or 3 things must Virginia do well that it can do well in order to win this game?
Well, one, I think, is we just talked about, they've got to try to control Carolina at the line of scrimmage and keep them from breaking, and just consistently getting decent runs against them, because if Carolina can do that, they can do anything they want, obviously, on offense, and it'll make it easier for the passing game. Number 2, I think Armstrong has to be accurate, and he has to get started early. If he hangs around and waits to kickstart things in the second half like he has at times, it'll be too late. He's got to do like he did against Miami, and they score on the first drive of the game. I don't know that he has to score on the first drive, but he's got to at least get something going early against Carolina, I think. Because it looks like the Carolina is going to be putting up points against just about anybody in every game. And, if Virginia has to play track meet with those guys, I don't know if they can do it. If they do, they really, really, really need to get off to a strong start. I think number 3 is that somehow they've got to find a way to not let Carolina's receivers get behind them, because there's been just some really too easy touchdown plays and long receptions made against this secondary recent weeks, just simply getting beat one-on-one. And they can't afford to do that. If they do, it's going to be over quick, I think.
And Carolina hit on a few of those last year in a game that UVA won, because UVA won the majority of the snaps that night, but Carolina still was able to hit on some big plays. He's Jerry Ratcliffe. You can go to jerryratcliffe.com and check out all the stuff about UVA football, basketball, and everything going on with the Wahoos, and follow him on Twitter at hootie_spellout.com. One of the best in the business. He's an absolute legend, someone I've learned from for years, and it's always a pleasure when we talk to you, Jerry. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Andrew and Jacob. Really enjoy talking to you guys all the time.
All right, thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you Saturday.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I'll have my jacket and gloves with me.
We'll bring them. It's going to be cold.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Great stuff from Jerry Ratcliffe there. Really enjoy him coming on and talking about UNC's opponent this weekend in Virginia. I mean, AJ, that's talking to a legend right there, right?
He is. He's one of the – there are several sports writers, media types in this region whom I have had my eye on for a long time, people that I read and want to emulate and learn how to be a professional from, and Jerry's on that list. Mm-hmm. He's one of the great writers from Virginia. You got guys like David Teal from up there, and of course my friend, Barry Jacobs down here, guys like Barry, and so many of them. I don't want to start naming a bunch of names so I don't leave anybody off, but Jerry is top notch, man. He's a Hall of Famer, no doubt.
Yeah, 100% definitely is. Based on his conversation, AJ, it sounds like to me this is a Virginia team that, like we mentioned earlier in the show, 1-4 probably doesn't reflect how good this team probably is. That's probably not really a fair, especially when you consider that Brennan Armstrong has missed some time for them. And it also sounds like you kind of mentioned to Jerry at the beginning, I mean, you got to, with Brennan Armstrong coming back, who's got a little bit of momentum with that, gives them a little bit of spark. And then, you got a chance to really make a statement, beat a ranked team in North Carolina at home. This could be a real Kickstarter for Virginia's season moving forward.
Well, Virginia has to play really well up front. So
Mhm.
Carolina's got to handle a group that can rush the passer, and stop the run. And that'll be a really big challenge for Carolina's defensive. And Phil Longo, I think Phil Longo said the other day that this will be their biggest test so far,
He did,
as
yeah.
far as the defenses they've gone up against, because there's a lot of length, a lot of size, a lot of experience, a lot of confidence. Some really good. If you haven't watched Charles Snowden play before, he can play. He's going to earn some coin at the next level.
Absolutely.
And so this is a challenge for the Carolina. There are a lot of parts to the challenge going into this game, but from a purely football standpoint, Tar Heels are going to have to be really good up front, because I think Virginia will be good up front. And then the Brennan Armstrong factor, if he's on early, that might be a bad sign for UNC, because based on what Jerry said, he's never on early. I was like Marquise Williams a few years ago.
Yeah.
Our former photographer Bruce Young used to he joked with Marquise one time, because Marquise would get off the tough starts and then get rolling, and Marquise's joke was, well, I just got to get popped one time, and then I kind of feel like I'm into the game. So Bruce joked with Marquise one time about how just get Schottmer to pulverize you in the locker room before you run out. Then you're in mid-game form at the first snap. So whatever they got to do to Brennan Armstrong to get him in mid-game form, maybe they'll do it in the locker room instead of waiting for the second quarter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's definitely going to be a key person for Virginia to have this weekend, especially consider he missed that Wake Forest game and came back against Miami, and that was a very close contest for the Hoos, and like Jerry mentioned, one in which they had a really good chance to win towards the end. Yeah. AJ, I don't know if I've even heard this story. I can't remember if you ever told me it, but you actually covered your first ever game as a reporter. It was up in Charlottesville for a Carolina-Virginia game, wasn't it?
Yeah, in fact, it was 24 years ago next week. It was November 6th, 1996. First time I ever had a credential to cover anything in my life. Number 6 UNC at a good UVA team. They may have been ranked like in the 18, 19, 20 range, something like that game. All the George Welsh teams were good. They were physical, well coached, and they exploited your mistakes. And it was a really big game for UNC. They hadn't won in Charlottesville in a while. And it was late in the year, so the Tar Heels win that game. That was back when they had the Bowl Alliance, and the next year was the BCS. It was the last year of the Bowl Alliance, but basically Carolina wins that game. They get a $6 million payday, go to a New Year's Day bowl game, which mattered back then, and maybe they start even higher in the rankings the following year.
Mm-hmm.
Tar Heels are up 17-3 in the fourth quarter. Dre Bly with a pick six, running down the field with the ball in one hand in classic Dre Bly fashion. And then everything fell apart. Chris Keldorf of the Tar Heels had the ball inside the 10. And some people said Mac should have kicked a field goal. They had a third down, and they tried to score a touchdown on the play, and it was a bad pass in the end. It was a bad route run by Octavius Barnes. He later said that he broke the wrong way. Antoine Harris, this is Deana's Dandies nugget for you, who's from Raleigh, picked off the pass and ran it basically 97 yards or whatever it was for a touchdown. Totally flipped the game around. UVA ends up kicking a field goal very late to win it 20-17. Carolina finished ranked 10th in the country that year, but that ended their Bowl Alliance hopes, which would have gotten the university a lot of money, and I think they would have been perceived differently going into the next year. So that was one of the biggest losses in Carolina history as far as how important the loss was. So that was my first game, my first ever experience. I'll never forget Mac Brown after the game. There was a setup at UVA. It was just like he's sitting at a table and the writers just kind of hovering around. It wasn't as formal as we did it pre-COVID. Right now, there's nothing formal about it at all on Zoom. And I remember just the questions. I'm looking at all these, Eddie Landreth, the late Eddie Landreth, one of my favorite people, the way they were asking questions and how Mac was handling it. And I just soaked it all in. I didn't ask anything. I don't think I may have asked a question about kickoffs. Carolina had a couple of kickoff issues where the ball went out of bounds and UVA got started to 35. I may have asked something like that, but I don't know if I had enough chutzpah. I actually don't recall for sure if I asked that question, but I remember just being in awe of the scenario, and Mac was not happy after the game.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine.
Colton Tudor had a cowboy hat on, and everybody in the area might remember the late, great Colton Tudor. So that was my first experience, and that was the first game I ever covered.
That's awesome.
And you know what? Every game I've covered since then has been awesome. It's been an amazing experience. But that was a pretty fascinating way to launch this career, which somehow is still going on.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great story. My first game was Western Carolina for Doors last year. So, I mean, it was a good game, and Carolina blew them out. But, it wasn't quite the top-ranked opponent playing in Charlottesville night game kind of thing. So that's an awesome way to start your career, AJ.
Still a great memory. It's a blessing to do this, so they're all great memories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Last thing I'll leave you with, AJ, before we end the show. What are 3 keys to victory for Carolina this weekend against Virginia?
I think they have to be physical.
Mm-hmm.
They have to match UVA's physicality. We don't know yet how physical this UNC team is.
Mm-mm.
They've had physical stretches, but this might be a game where they've just got to scrap, claw, fight, punch, kick until either they separate themselves or up to the very end to win this game. So they've got to be very physical. They've got to be real physical, blind scrimmage, but everywhere. Can they run the ball well enough and also keep UVA off of sand? If they could do that, they're going to score points because they can exploit UVA defensively and go over the top of the defense. I think Carolina's skill is superior to the skill UVA will try to match it with on defense. And I think the other thing is right now, like, where is Carolina mentally right now? We talked about it in the first segment, but they have to complete a great week of practice, and they have to go up to Charlottesville in a much better mindset, a much more laser-focused mindset than Tallahassee. If they do that, then I think a lot of that other stuff's gonna work in there. They're gonna be who they really are. Those are the 3 keys, Jacob. They've got to be physical. That's the early in the game. UVA is going to try to establish total physicality on them. Mm-hmm. How does Carolina respond? That'll be another one of these lab experiments that I so much adore.
Absolutely, AJ. Well, another great show. Really enjoyed talking to Deana earlier. Really enjoyed having Jerry on here as well. And AJ, always a pleasure talking to you on the THI preview.
Likewise, my friend.
Excuse me, THI football preview podcast. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.